Don't be an NPC.
So, welcome back, everyone, to yet another episode of Zillennial Money. I know we have been away for a few weeks, but it's just scheduling conflicts, and it's for a reason that I'll cover in the first story. It's took a trip to Vegas, so we'll talk about that. But this is we're finally back, and this is episode 60, I think. I've lost track of the numbers, but lots of stories that have come out this week, so it's going to be an exciting episode. So this week it's just going to be me and Sunil, and I don't know if Dom will join us later, but it's going to be a smaller crowd today, but lots to cover. So anyways, let's jump into it. First story, I mentioned just 30 seconds ago that I took a trip to Vegas, and that was for, of course, the Bitcoin conference. So I met up with Sunil there. We went separately, but met up at the conference. So since you're here today, Sunil, why don't I pass the mic to you first, and then you can share some thoughts about the Bitcoin conference. And then I don't have the pictures handy, but maybe I'll post some of the pictures I took of the trip in post, and then I'll include some of them in this video. But yeah, just maybe share your general thoughts of what did you think of the conference? What did you like? What didn't you like? If there was anything, will you be going to the conference next year? Next year is going to be in Vegas again, same location at the Venetian, which is pretty nice location, if I do say so myself. I got lost in the building several times. The place is huge. But yeah, let me pass the mic to you, Sunil, and you can take it away.
Yeah, the conference was great. It was cool hanging out with you. It's been about a year since we met each other in Nashville for the conference a year ago. This is my fourth Bitcoin conference, my second Bitcoin magazine conference, which is the big one for people who don't know. It's always great to be at these events. Just because you don't get to bump into Bitcoiners and nerd out very often. It's hard to meet Bitcoiners in normal life since we're basically still a very small percentage of the population. So it's always nice to hang out in the expo hall, speaking to vendors, learning about products. It's kind of an area where you get to have it's kind of lead notification on things that are about to come out in Bitcoin. That's kind of my favorite part of these conferences is kind of talking to people who work at big Bitcoin companies like Blockstream and stuff, and they kind of give you hints about what's coming out. It's always great to meet new Bitcoiners, which we do at every conference. The Michael Saylor speech, always inspirational, always full of information. I like how he kind of dressed up as our Bitcoin priest, where he had his little Bitcoin symbol right there. I even caught some of the talks online, like the Ross Urbeck talk was kind of great, just because he was one of the original Bitcoiners, and how it was just kind of inspirational to hear how Bitcoiners kind of stood by him and got him out of prison, and used our political power kind of for the first time in a substantial way. Other than that, highlights. I don't really have anything specific. I just always like kind of hanging out at the expo hall and meeting Bitcoiners. I always like learning about Bitcoin companies, and it kind of keeps you on the cutting edge of knowledge, which is very interesting. And I don't know. I don't really have any negatives about it. It was a giant conference, but they kind of get bigger every year, and this was a bull market cycle, so yeah, it's kind of hard to get in. Starting off with JD Vance was great. He's a really, really good speaker. It's just kind of nice to know that when our industry for the first time has the backing of the White House, and it just makes me feel pretty confident about things going into the future.
Yeah, great. And I'll add some of my comments to it too, I guess. So, a friend asked me afterwards, after I came back from the conference, which, he didn't go to the conference, obviously. So he asked me, what did you think of the conference, of like the mood of the people there? And then and then I responded to him. I'm like, hey, you know what? This is like the most bullish kind of sentiment that I've ever seen in Bitcoin. Granted, I haven't been to that many Bitcoin conferences. I did go to the Nashville one last year, and I would say that the mood at the Vegas conference was even bigger, like even more bullish than the Nashville one, because I guess the Nashville one we were at like 50K, I think, and then now we're at 100K. Even though it started dipping as the conference was going on, it I find that it always tends to do that. It's like the conference curse, or maybe some people call it the JD Vance curse, because JD Vance spoke there. It's like, the day after he speaks to the Pope dies. So like maybe he cursed us. Who knows? But like whatever. The mood was really good, I would have to say. And then obviously I agree with you, Sunil, that I really enjoyed meeting new Bitcoiners, and meeting other Bitcoiners, and that was a really great experience. And I went to Steak and Shake, and I started talking to this random guy who wanted to pay in Bitcoin because they accept Bitcoin now. Except it just so happens that we decided to go to that one Steak and Shake, which was the closest one to the conference, by the way. But apparently that was the only one that didn't take Bitcoin. And the guy in front of me, he's like a German guy, and he was trying to pay with Bitcoin. They didn't let him, and I I had the same problem once I got to the front of the line, and then I just started talking to him. And it's just it's great. Like I always say that Bitcoin's kind of like a cult in this way, but like in a good way, right? Like you see other people who are Bitcoiners, and then you can just strike up a conversation with them so easily, even if they're a complete stranger. So, which is how I met Sunil, by the way, at Nashville when we were waiting in line for the Trump speech. And talk about speeches at the conference. My favorite was actually Lynn Alden's. So I know, Sunil, you think that like Lynn Alden is kind of a doomer, and I would agree with you on that. But she had a great speech I liked it even more than the Saylor speech. Obviously, I respect Saylor a lot, but I feel like Saylor, he drones on sometimes, and he always has to like present his thesis in 21 things. And then sometimes I feel like he stretches a little, like he didn't need 21 points to cover it all, right? So, like nearing the end, I feel like, okay, like some of these could have been condensed to like lesser points, like a lesser amount of points, but whatever. I actually really liked Lynn Alden's speech, where she has this catchphrase called "Nothing stops this train," and that's actually from Breaking Bad, which is one of my favorite shows. So I won't go through the entire kind of speech again. You guys can watch it; it's online. So yeah, that's kind of my experience at the conference. I don't want to spend too long on this topic because we do have other topics that we need to get to on tonight's show. But to end off on this topic, I'm just going to bring up two controversial things that happened, or it was presented at the Bitcoin conference. And since Sunil, you went to the conference, let me get your thoughts on it. Right. So number one is Jack Dorsey's company, BitKey, which is a company that makes hardware wallets, but BitKey is doing something different, where it's multi-sig by nature, and they split your key into three different portions, and then you need two out of the three portions to move any Bitcoin. So there's one portion that's on the BitKey itself. There's one portion that's backed up through your phone through iCloud. If you use Apple, or if you use Google, I think it supports Google Drive as well. And then another portion is held with BitKey, the company. So that way, BitKey, they only have one portion, and you need at least two, so they don't have the ability to steal your Bitcoin. But that means if you lose your phone, but you still have the hardware key, then you can still recover your Bitcoin. Or if you lose your BitKey and you still have your phone, then you can do it as well, right? Or, if BitKey goes bankrupt, then you still have your phone and you still have the hardware wallet then you're good as well. So it's kind of like a multi-sig setup by default, and there's no way to view your seed phrase and get it out. So it's controversial because seed phrases have been the way that Bitcoiners have kept their crypto and Bitcoin safe for forever since it was invented. But BitKey had a controversial slogan called "Lose Your Seed Phrase," and that ticked off a lot of people because people are so used to seed phrases these days that like having your own seed phrase is kind of like almost an integral part of being a Bitcoiner at this point. So to see a Bitcoin company say "lose your seed phrase," that's quite traumatizing for some people, right? Because some people actually did lose their seed phrase before, and they lost all their Bitcoin. So yeah, that's controversy number one. And controversy number two, I just found out recently that the owner of Steak and Shake, or the company that owns it, they also own Maxim magazine, which is like a racy hot models magazine, and they hired a bunch of people dressed up in cow costumes to dance around the Bitcoin logo, and their booth was kind of like they had like a food truck kind of thing that was set up near the center of the expo hall where the Bitcoin 2025 conference logo was, and a lot of people found it really cringy. So just I'm not sure if you saw that video of the dancing cow people, but that was another controversy that was like, people are saying that is going to be the thing that marks the top of the bull market, and we're only going down from there. And I don't want to say that they're right, but Bitcoin has only gone down since the conference happened. So, what if that was a curse that sends us, back down to 50K and sends us back to a bear market? So, just get your thoughts on those two things, Sunil. So I'll pass the mic to you.
Yeah, sure. On the I mean, I'm a huge fan of Jack Dorsey. I own some of his stock for Square or Block. And when like even when he ran Twitter for a period of time, I owned his stock. I've always kind of thought of him as like a visionary in the tech world. He's never been like the kind of visionary that's created as much value as Elon, but I kind of follow him, and he's actually one of the reasons I started taking Bitcoin more seriously. I was always kind of following it, but didn't take it seriously until Jack Dorsey kind of got into it. But and I think he's doing a lot of great things for Bitcoin. Like I think Block is going to be like a behemoth. They're kind of like the anti like micro strategy play where they're like focusing on Bitcoin development. They're focusing on developing like open source mining hardware. They're focusing on developing an easy to use wallet. I think the BitKey, from my understanding, is one of the easier to use wallets, and I do think that I understand the controversy of lose my seed phrase. Like personally, I'm a big fan of like Blockstream Jade's technology because it's fully open source and they give you a seed phrase because it's a motto in Bitcoin, not your phrase. Sorry, not your sorry, what is it? Not your no say it again. Yeah.
Not your keys, not your coins.
Not your
Yeah.
keys, not your coins. I knew that. I just forgot it for this podcast. But yeah, basically, I've always, that motto is very, very important to Bitcoiners, and so I can understand why it's controversial. I think that like Jack's making a move, knowing that one day like Bitcoin's gonna follow a lot of like early internet technologies, and that it's just gonna get like simpler and simpler over time to make it easier for individuals to use the technology. Like for example, in the early days of the internet, you literally had to like key in the URL code by numbers before you got into like being able to just type in like google.ca or whatever. Um, so basically, I think that like that's the kind of trajectory that Bitcoin is like destined to follow. That you're eventually gonna get these kinds of products that are so easy to use that you don't even need to write down your seed phrase. And I think that it's a cool proof of concept. Personally, as a Bitcoiner, I'm not using that product yet. I'm a huge fan of Blockstream J because I believe in the open source model and I believe in a lot of the like I believe in just how they're like building their technology out. They also have some proprietary stuff with their multi key technology that's similar to Blockstream Jade, where like the company holds one of your keys, which is also controversial in Bitcoin. but I'm not like against the product, and I'm not against the attempt of the product, and I really think that it's probably going to be one of the products that helps scale Bitcoin users because it's so easy to use. But right now, I'm just kind of waiting to see where it goes. I'm waiting to see if this product has any like critical errors or not, and we'll probably find out soon if there's anything wrong with it. I'd probably be willing to pick up a BitKey. Personally, I'm still using Blockstream Jade myself for my private keys. Um, so I'm not really against what Jack Dorsey's trying to do by trying to make like Bitcoin more consumer friendly. But I don't necessarily want to put myself in a position where I don't have access to my own seed phrase. That's kind of where I am with that. Um, with the what is it, Steak and Shake company? I mean, I think that's just a good sign for Bitcoin that you get like these like brand names are starting to like get focused on Bitcoin and try to make money off of this like societal trend. So that's like generally a good thing. I don't really have a huge opinion. I didn't actually see the video, and I don't have a huge opinion on whether this is going to be like the end of the market or not, or the end of the bull cycle. But I for me, it's like when you have big like corporations that like consumers under know, and those corporations are embracing Bitcoin, that's always positive to me. So like I don't really have anything negative to say about it. I hope that this isn't like going to be a curse, like when Elon bought Bitcoin, it spiked, hit the top, and that was kind of the top of the market. So I hope we don't get anything like that. But I don't think Steak and Shake is a big enough company to really have that kind of influence.
Right. Talking about Elon, if you're ready, let's move on to the next story of the night, which is the big story. This actually wasn't originally in the docket, but it kind of blew up just today, right before the show started. So I was, if we didn't have a previously scheduled show for tonight, I think it would have warranted maybe an emergency podcast because that's how big the news was. So, unfortunately, the Elon and Trump divorce is finally here. And this is something that liberals have been predicting for a really long time, ever since Elon endorsed Trump. And I've looked at the situation, throughout the kind of, I want to say years, but it hasn't even been that long. The months that Elon has endorsed Trump, and I was saying that I was kind of brushing off the criticism, saying that this time it seems like Elon is for reals, getting kind of friendly with Trump, and then they're going to build a long lasting friendship for real. But it seems like, unfortunately, I hate to admit it, but the liberals were right. And Elon's personality versus Trump's personality, people say that it was always inevitable that something like this could happen and would happen. But I didn't want to believe it until it finally blew up, right? So, yeah, it's unfortunate, but just to give you guys some background on the story, in case you guys didn't know like what caused this, it all comes back to Trump's promises of fiscal responsibility and balancing the budget, or reducing the deficit, and that's actually part of the reason why Elon. It's a big reason why Elon endorsed Trump, right? Because it's part of the reason why Trump invited Elon to do Doge, Department of Government Efficiency, but it seems like lately Trump's been really pushing this one big beautiful bill, as he calls it, which includes a lot of spending, and some of it's, I would say, good, right? Like he's trying to fulfill a lot of campaign promises like the tax cuts and all of that, but critics, and there are a lot of critics, have said that this bill includes a lot of what's called pork, and in political speak, pork means like just unnecessary fat, right? Like it's just unnecessary spending, wasteful spending, all of that. So as it stands, I think there's estimates that this bill, if passed, would add $4 trillion to the U.S. deficit. It's basically kind of the opposite of fiscal responsibility, which it's a tough spot for Trump, because he could argue, and he is arguing, that he's fulfilling campaign promises by cutting taxes, but at the same time, he's also going back on his campaign promises of fiscal responsibility. And this is what Elon has been heavily criticizing. And this all came to a head today when Elon just completely went off on X, bashing Trump's support of this bill. And then eventually it got nasty, and then they traded jabs that were not like fully related to the bill even. So yeah, this dispute is here. So before I pass it off to you, Sunil, let me just read kind of a tweet that I posted, right? So just some of my initial thoughts on just the whole Elon situation. So I see a lot of people on X kind of just celebrating this breakup, especially people who obviously didn't like Trump, and maybe they didn't like Elon because of his association with Trump. But now, like, you know, some of those people, I guess they're starting to flip a little, right? Because now they're like, okay, well, I didn't like Trump, I hated Trump, and then I hated Elon because he was associated with Trump. But now Elon's flipping on Trump, so now I love Elon. And this is what I have to say to people like that, right? I'm not saying everybody is like this. A lot of people still don't like Elon, but this is what I said, right? Like, if you hated Elon because of his actions for Doge before, but you're changing your mind now because of Elon's dispute with Trump, then you're an NPC. Elon supported Trump because he thought that Trump would cut the spending and tackle the fiscal situation in a real way. Elon spent his sweat, blood, and tears at Doge for this precise reason, and his dealerships got firebombed for it. By the way, isn't it like, how would you feel as somebody who got arrested and got, like, you know, 10, 20 years in prison for firebombing a Tesla, only for this to happen just like a month after you go to jail? So just saying, right? Maybe it wasn't worth it to firebomb.
Yeah, not the best political strategy. No.
Yeah, I mean, it's so ridiculous, right? Like, that people actually did that. But yeah, anyways, Elon's current dispute with Trump is because it seems like Trump is unwilling to take America's fiscal situation seriously and is threatening to undo all the work that Elon has done at Doge. But the important thing to note is that Elon has stayed consistent in his position throughout all of this. So if you hated Elon before but love him now, you've just proven that you hated him because the media told you you should hate him, which makes you an NPC, right? And this is what I've seen from a lot of Democrats, where the Democrats are all of a sudden all for, you know, release the Epstein files, or like, you know, kill the bill, cut the deficit, fiscal responsibility, let's go. It's like, did they just forget that they had the White House for like 4 years before Trump? Just saying, right? Like, they didn't do any of that. And I still stand by my statement that, like, even though a lot of Democrats are kind of celebrating this breakup and celebrating how, like, oh, Trump has failed, he can't keep his people together, and there's no like unity left in the Republican Party, blah blah blah. You do realize that if the Democrats had won, you know, just the trifecta, let's say, or not even just the trifecta, let's just say they won the presidential election, this fiscal situation would 100%, in my opinion, be worse if it was, you know, a Democrat president, if it was Kamala Harris leading the charge for a new budget. Just saying, right? Like, I know a lot of Americans don't pay attention to what's happening in Canada, but just look at what's happening in Canada, right? With the new Liberal Carney government, who's going to increase the deficit even more than Trudeau. And people were criticizing Trudeau for way overspending, while Carney's going to spend more than Trudeau. So anyways, I digress. Let's not talk about Canada now, but let's just talk about this kind of Elon Trump dispute. Do you think it's over, or is there a way kind of for both parties to, you know, make amends, get remarried, you know, take a step, maybe let's not go that far yet, but take a step back, make amends, kiss and make up, you know, just or is it just complete divorce over, and like JD Vance is going to be, you know, like the parentless child that's bouncing between two parents who are fighting for custody? Like, what do you think is going to happen from here on out? And are you more on Trump's side, or are you more on Elon's side, or are you kind of in between both? Or because I know, Sunil, like you voiced your support for Elon and Trump before in the past, so I think as someone who can see kind of maybe validity on both sides, you have a pretty clear eye on this situation. So what do you think of this situation in general?
Yeah, I guess. I guess I'll start with, like I've said it in previous episodes. There's a big difference between Mega 1.0 and Mega 2.0. I wasn't really part of Mega 1.0, but I did over time become sympathetic to a lot of their positions and understanding like why Americans were voting this way, why Americans were moving towards Trump and moving towards his kind of politics and right wing populism. Like I get it, and that's kind of where where I've been for a while, but I wasn't necessarily like ready to join Mega. That kind of happened when Mega 2.0 happened. Like I like to say that like the Koch brothers were replaced by the PayPal mafia with Trump 2.0, where like in the first Trump administration, like the big Republican donors still kind of sat by Trump and still kind of had a lot of influence over his administration, while in the second uh, Trump administration, he's just been Peter Thiel, Elon, David Sack, literally like the three top executives of PayPal have kind of taken over this administration, have like removed the old guard Republicans from the party. Um, so I mean, I guess it's like currently it's a little bit disappointing that Trump has like all that, like Elon kind of leads the way with that Silicon Valley influence, and this kind of seems to be showing that Silicon Valley doesn't have. It's kind of losing against Mega 1.0. Mega 2.0 is kind of in a timeout right now. So that's like disappointing. I'm disappointed to see them fighting. I think that the marriage is not over, and it's going to be very easy for these guys to like make up and like have a photo op, and maybe it'll take until like the end of the year or next year or something like that. But I don't think it's over between these two. I think that like they're fighting. Elon is like this. I never really had a timeline when their marriage would fall apart, but I always knew that Elon would betray Trump eventually. Like from Trump's perspective, I get it. Like he wants political loyalty. He wants Elon to just like be his cheerleader, and now he's not, and that's probably pretty frustrating for Trump because Trump's trying to like get what he can get passed through this bill. Um, I'm still a Mega 2.0 kind of guy. I'm a Doge guy, not a Mega 1.0 kind of guy. So I think that like I'm obviously on Elon's side. I think that Trump's like commentary today is actually one where they're kind of panicking because I think Elon's actually like potentially going to kill this bill, and Trump really wants a political victory here. Like he wants to get his tax cuts through. He has a few initiatives that he really wanted to get through, like finishing his wall and that kind of stuff. And now he's not. And Elon, his like most important political ally, is working to block that bill and working to block a major success story for the Trump administration. So like I get it from Trump's point of view, but in the end, Elon is much more principled here. He does stick to his principles, you know. And like yeah, in a very spectrumy way, like he just can't move away from it. He came into the Trump administration with like Doge being one of the signature promises he signed up for. I think that Elon and like the PayPal mafia had a huge impact, a positive impact on the Trump administration, like in terms of their like industrial policy. But and I think that was a huge success, and I think that that's not going to really change. But when it comes to Doge, I can understand Elon's frustrations considering he put so much hard work into it. The All In podcast kind of foreshadowed this fight over the last few weeks. Guys like Friedberg and Chamath have been like pushing back against the fact that Trump was going to sign the Big Beautiful Bill, and the Big Beautiful Bill was actually going to kind of erase the progress of Doge. They also acknowledge that Doge cannot really be implemented until Congress like approves it. So I think like if the main losers here is like the political establishment, both the left and right, don't just look really bad here. It just shows you how hard it is to deal with a Washington swamp, like how corrupt they truly are, and how you can't like it doesn't matter how good your ideas and how smart you are, you just can't break the swamp. It's a big project to do so. In terms of the Democrats being giddy, I mean, I don't think the Democrats are going to be able to capitalize on this or gain any votes or gain any popularity. I think that they're going to probably mess it up. Like a smarter led party with a smarter leader, smarter leadership would probably be able to capitalize on this and get Elon on their side. But this Democratic Party, I don't believe they will. I think they're going to continue to stay on the sidelines, and they're gonna have their like kind of vitriol moment. But like honestly, they're not really a part of the conversation. They're kind of off to the side. They have no credibility. Nobody cares what they have to say. Like you said, they were in power for the last 4 years. If they were in power, they'd probably be expanding the bill. But I find the Democrats are really good at like naming bills with like sympathetic names so that they can be like, oh, Elon's removing AIDS funding in Africa. Elon's doing this. Elon's removing cancer money for kids. But we all know that most of that money just ends up like, we all know that most like while Washington might be like able to give a bill a sympathetic name, that money just ends up being wasted. Like so, like I don't think that most of the Democratic talking points like around U.S. aid or anything like that actually has made made a dent in like either Trump or Elon's popularity. So that's kind of how I feel about the Democrats. Like, yeah, they're gonna make noise right now, and all like the um, all like the partisans on Twitter and everything are gonna like be pretty happy about this. But like, this isn't gonna like help the Democrats because the Democrats aren't gonna be able to deliver like an economic message that's actually gonna be beneficial for Americans. So that's really where they are right now. Um, and then the last thing I'll say is that like I always kind of saw Doge as like a I never really thought that Doge would have an impact where they were going to be able to like balance the budget this year. I was hoping that it would be able to make like somewhat of a dent, so I guess I was wrong about that. But I think that the main impact of Doge and the main impact of Elon here is actually similar to the Twitter files, where like Elon is able to like change the conversation and kind of control the conversation. Like if you remember the Twitter files, like, there's a lot of Democrats that didn't even read it, and there's a lot of Democrats that like just like called it a nothing burger. But if you I don't know if you paid attention as much as me, but a lot of Democrats like in the podcast scene that like took the Twitter files seriously, like I can't think of any off the top of my head that actually voted for the Democrats, that voted for Kamala Harris. They all voted for Trump. So I think that like the Twitter files uh, had a major impact on like the political conversation. It changed people's opinions on who the Democrats were because it showed that the Democrats were actually extremely corrupt and like not really willing to stand up for core American values like freedom of speech, and it like left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. And a lot of like popular pro-democrat politicians, sorry, like podcast hosts, for example, like very like influential people like Andrew Sullivan and Joe Rogan all kind of switched over at that point, and they all like talked about the Twitter files as one of their main motivations. So I think Doge is like one of those things. Like I'm watching the political conversation on X today, and a lot of the types of people that were in Mega 2.0 are squarely with Elon. I think that Elon's he's the kind of person who like he's only loyal to his agenda. He set his agenda very clearly. He wants to have a major impact on America's fiscal crisis, and he wants to have a positive impact on that. And he's gonna be relentless until it happens. And like Trump has his own motivations. He wants to get some kind of bill passed with some of his agenda getting through in the first term, and Elon is probably gonna do everything he can to block it. And I think that Elon, at this point, Elon has probably successfully made it so that the Senate will not pass the bill, the House version of the bill. I don't think we're going to be seeing like a balanced budget or anything soon, anytime soon. But I think that Doge has completely and permanently changed the political conversation. And I actually think that like Trump is going to moderate his words against Elon, because we got to remember that like Elon basically bankrolled his campaign, and Elon's got like 150 million, $200 million waiting on the sidelines to like basically primary any like House members or senators who might be putting pork into this bill. And I think this is a very smart bipartisan effort, and I think that the fact that Elon is pissing off both sides is a good thing. That's showing that he's doing something right.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. On the face value, if you just look at the situation, like on the surface level, my initial reaction was that Elon seems like he's jumping the gun a little, because this bill, remember, it hasn't passed yet. Like it still needs to pass the Senate, and there's quite a few Republican senators, i.e. Rand Paul, and I think there's Ron Johnson from Wisconsin. Like among like there are a few among many that have said that they're not going to vote for this bill as is without significant amendments, right? And then once they add the amendments, it doesn't go to Trump, it goes back to the House. And if you read into what happened with the bill passing the House the first time, what happened was there was a guy that fell asleep because they did this vote at like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. or something. Like they purposely picked a time like in the middle of the night when everyone's off guard and everyone's like, you know, kind of winding down. They did this vote at 2 a.m. One person was asleep. And then I think another congressman sadly passed away shortly before the vote was scheduled to take place. So they were down like two people who I think they were like going to vote against it. They were like both Democrats, I think, or even if one of them was Republican, like they were both no votes, but then like they didn't get to vote because one of them died and one of them fell asleep. And then this bill ended up passing by one vote. So if it wasn't for like, you know, that person, like, and if by the way, if it's a tie, then it's a no, right? So by default. So yeah, basically this bill should have like not even technically made it out of the House if it was just under normal circumstances. And now that it hasn't made it past the House, is probably, if it was that tight in the House, is probably not gonna pass the Senate, at least not as is. The Senate's gonna have their amendments, it's gonna go back to the House, and then that's not a guarantee that it's gonna, the amended version is gonna pass the House either, because maybe like people are either either sad that the amendments are not enough, or they think the amendments are too much. Like this always happens, right, between the Senate and the House. So my point is that there was really like not an immediate need for Elon to go completely, fully guns blazing, but he chose to do that. And maybe I would agree with you, Sunil, that that's like maybe that's part of his tactic, right? It's like a 4D chess move to like thrust this topic into the middle of like everyone's conversations at this point, and just, you know, this is one way to really get Trump to change his mind if he's at all willing, right? I'm not sure if Trump is going to change his mind, but uh, yeah, I just think that there's at least now there's a chance, right? Because now there's political pressure on the Republican politicians as well. So that's point number one. And what I'll say about Trump is that, yeah, I mean, I'm obviously disappointed in the way that, you know, this bill has turned out and Trump's kind of performance as well. I really expected more of MAGA 2.0, as you would put it. So I think one of the reasons why MAGA 1.0, or Trump's first term, was not as good as people, you know, would have expected. At least it's like, in my opinion, Trump's first term wasn't all that great. Was because I think the deep state, or whatever, the swamp, whatever you want to call it, kind of got his arms around Trump before he, you know, really managed to make any radical changes. So Trump was always the kind of outsider candidate. So you would expect somebody who's, you know, not a career politician, and he promised a lot of like big radical changes too. When someone from the outside finally manages to get in, you would expect, I think, a little bit more positive stuff to come out of it. But I didn't really see. I mean, obviously, there were some positives that the economy was doing pretty well during his first term, and he did largely take care of the border crisis, which flared up once he left office again under the Democrats. But you know, in all of things, if you were to just look at the kind of amount of radical change and fundamental change to the system, I think MAGA 1.0, Trump's first term, was a failure at that. And I think that that was because the deep state, or the swamp, or whatever you want to call it, got his arms around Trump, right? And I'm just afraid that the same thing is going to happen, or is already happening to Trump during his second term. So this bill is the perfect example, right? It's like it has some of Trump, what Trump wants, but then there's a lot of what, these career politicians, these, neocon Republicans, if you want to call them that, they put in their own stuff in the bill, and then Trump is kind of, he's impatient. I think this is one of his worst character flaws. He's stubborn and he's impatient. He doesn't have the temperance, right? Like, if he really wanted to, I think, like, he could spend a little bit more time, and he would eventually, I think, be relatively successful at that, and talk to the House Republicans, talk to Mike Johnson, the House Speaker, get him to be like, hey, like, I want these tax cuts because I promised this, but drop all the like other stuff that these like neocons are like trying to bake into the bill, right? Like, it would have taken a lot more time, a lot more negotiation, and a lot more headache. And I think that Trump is he's just impatient, right? He just wants a win, and he just like, I don't care, I'm gonna get a win, get my tax cuts done, and then you guys, go party, go do whatever you want, and add whatever you want to the bill. And I think that that's just the wrong approach. I wish Trump would be a little bit more, considerate, or a little more patient with this process. And you see this a lot in the tariff negotiations too, where it's like, I'm gonna do this now, and then I'm gonna like increase tariffs on you now, and then next week I'm gonna give you a deadline. You better come back to me with a trade deal. It's like, okay, well, like, trade deals don't happen that fast, and even though Trump is in a position of strength, like, America's strength is not so much that he can just ask for anything and then get a trade deal with any country next week, right? And I just think that with a lot of the tariff negotiations, Trump is being a little, unreasonable, and I think that that is part of his character flaw, that he's impatient and he doesn't have the temperance to actually go through with, the process of negotiating, and you know reaching out the olive branch and getting people to really trust you and build that kind of rapport with the person that you're negotiating with. He just wants to strong arm everybody, and that's not necessarily always the best plan. Sometimes it works for him, but a lot of times, I think it's the negative consequences are starting to show up. So yeah, this is just my overall thoughts. I mean, I was super bullish on Trump's second term, and in some ways, I am still bullish. But I just wish that Trump would, reflect upon his, decisions and actions a little bit more, and be a little bit less reckless. So, I'm not sure, Sunil, you would agree with what I said, my assessment, but curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you had to say there. Your like Trump's flaws are clear. I mean, I even though I support some aspects of what he's been doing, I do think he's got these flaws. The way he's very abrasive, the way he talks to people. Like he got he got the Liberals reelected in Canada because he couldn't keep his mouth shut. Like, he has flaws. There's no doubt about it. And the reason I supported this administration is because I'm a mega 2.0 guy. I don't give a shit about the wall. I don't care about 90% of Trump's like original agenda. I care about Doge. I care about like America making a big impact on their spending issues. Like I do believe America's in a fiscal crisis, and I think that Elon believes that America's in a fiscal crisis. So like he's not gonna bend on that one. And I think that like yeah, like Elon did jump the gun, like because there were already senators that said we're not going to vote for this bill, and like the way the bill passed, where like half the senators they did it in the middle of the night because they wanted to squeeze through all their pork stuff, and half the House members didn't even read the bill. Probably more than half didn't even read the bill. They didn't even know what they're voting for, and Elon just exposes so much of what's wrong with Washington. Like the media isn't covering this stuff. The media isn't talking about the pork. The media is not talking because like there's a uniparty in Washington. They want to get their stuff passed. The Democrats spent the last like several months talking about DEI and women of color and whatever race baiting issue or whatever issue they use to kind of try to divide people and manipulate people's emotions. And nobody, and every, I think it's clear that nobody, like most like reasonable centrists don't really care. And I think that Elon and Trump's like alliance was like slaying that dragon. They slayed the dragon of the Democratic Party elite, and they're just like mumbling idiots now who nobody listens to. They have no credibility. But I think that Elon's like true fight was always going to be to beat the swamp. Like the swamp isn't just the Democratic Party; it's been created by both sides. Uh, and like we need some. And Trump was supposed to be that like outsider who came in and like slayed that dragon. That's what that was one of the things that Mega 1.0 agenda was about draining the swamp. Trump joined that part of the agenda. Sorry, Elon joined that part of the agenda. Like J Cal on the All In podcast said that like this is a really this was something what you were elected to do, like you have a mandate to do something about the debt. So you should be Trump. His criticism was that Trump should be using the bully pulpit to like get something done on this issue. So I think Elon did jump the gun, but this is his tactic. He wanted to give people like Rand Paul a little bit of gas so that they can kind of force some kind of actual fiscal prudence. And I think he's probably gonna get like a minor win here. Like I don't think that like Doge is gonna be implemented fully by the end of this fight. But I think that Elon just kind of reminded Trump who's in charge. He kind of just reminded Trump like it was like the PayPal mob and me that got you elected, and now there was a lot of vitriol about Elon leaving the White House. Uh, that was, I mean, I know aside from all the sensationalism and vitriol, like it was actually established very early on that Elon would leave the White House around June or July, and that's exactly what happened. And then I think Elon felt like his most important agenda item wasn't really making the impact he wanted it. So I think he kind of planned that the second he left the White House, he was going to do this. He was going to kind of create noise, and he was going to like basically shock the Trump administration, and basically in the end, I think the most reasonable people that I'm seeing on X, most reasonable centrists, are basically agree that Elon's right. Trump failed on this issue. It makes Trump look really bad. It makes the congressional Republicans look horrible. The Democrats made themselves look horrible, and nobody cares what they have to say. So I think Elon's gonna have to like slay this dragon, and he's gonna have to find a way to get some Doge type wins in this budget, even if they're small initially, just to show that he has influence uh, over politics, to show that he can use his like platform X to kind of make the Republicans look like imposter idiots. And I think he's actually done that successfully. It's just a question of how long it takes for this like kitchen table conversation to really make a huge impact. I kind of see Trump as like the Ross Perot of this era. Ross Perot used his $1 billion fortune to like get himself on stage with Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush. He was the first like third party candidate in modern times to be on a debate stage, and then went on and talked about the debt and completely changed America's conversation on on the fiscal prudence of the federal government, and that actually led to a situation where both the Democrats and Republicans had to take the deficit seriously. And Bill Clinton was the first president since I believe the 1950s to balance the budget, and he got help from a Republican Congress to do so. So I kind of see Elon as like a Ross Perot character of this like election cycle, and I think he's basically forced a conversational change that the corporate media doesn't want to have, and it's a conversation that the Democrats don't want to have. They want to keep talking about DEI and racism and sexism and all whatever issue that they want to kind of grift on, and the Republicans want to sneak their neocon nonsense into these bills. They're not Neocons always talk about the deficit, but they're not serious about the budget. They don't care about America's future, and Trump and Elon has fully exposed them. Elon and Trump together expose the Democrats for what they are, like grifter idiots that have no substance to their policy, and they're also now Elon alone, I guess, is basically revealing what the Republicans are. They're just scam artists. They give lip service to fiscal prudence, but they never actually balance any budgets themselves. The Republicans are actually worse than the Democrats historically when it comes to like fiscal prudence. And I think Elon kind of always knew he would have this battle ahead of him, and now he's making his move.
The Republicans are more in favor of increasing defense spending, right? Like that's the big one. And that's like again, that's a big line item, and then they're in favor of increasing it more than the Democrats. And in this bill, the one big beautiful bill increases defense spending when it was already revealed, I think by Doge actually, just a few months ago, that like the Pentagon frequently spends like thousands of dollars for like hand sanitizer dispensers or something. Like each dispenser costs like, $2,000 or $8,000 or whatever. Like it was thousands of dollars per dispenser, not for a whole box, just one. And you can buy one for like less than $5 at the local Walmart. And it's a dispenser bottle. They're the exact same, right? So you see a lot of those happening in like the US military. And yeah, I would agree with you that that's a huge problem, first of all. And the Republicans, the neocons, they're pocketing all that money, right? Obviously, it doesn't cost them $2,000 to make a dispenser. Like somebody's pocketing that money, right? But yeah, this issue is it's definitely, I think it's a big issue, and it's even, I would say, existential to America, right? If it's not solved properly. So again, I'm disappointed in Trump in not really, in my opinion, taking this issue seriously. And let's hope that Elon and Trump can make up. Trump can maybe, come to his senses and, uh, pull back his support of some of the pork that's in this one big, beautiful bill, and maybe still get the tax cuts done, but do it in a way that's a lot more fiscally responsible than the way that he's going about this now. So that's basically all I have to say. We'll guess I'll have to wait and see. This like Silicon Valley and politics merger with the PayPal mafia, like you said, Sunil, with the U.S. government, the White House. This has the potential to be the match made in heaven. I like this is everything you want. Like when you take like the efficiency of this, like the intelligence and efficiency of the PayPal mafia and the tech scene, and then you merge it with government. Imagine how much the US, and the US is already the most powerful country in the world, like imagine how much you can achieve, right? But now all that's in jeopardy because of this dispute. So hopefully it's not more of the same that we've seen out of the US government, which is like, people vote for the change candidate and then nothing ends up ever changing.
And I think that this proves that you can't handle this fiscal crisis with a scalpel. You need a sledgehammer, and I think Elon's proving it. He's proving how powerful the swamp is, and you just have to kind of like destroy the swamp and break them up to 1,000 pieces for them to actually not be able to come back together again.
Yeah, I just want to know if like everyone who's been hating on Elon for the past like 6 months or however long that Elon's endorsed Trump, like are they regretting their hate on Elon now, or are they coming around, or does it not happen that fast, right? Because my prediction is that the longer this dispute goes on, it's actually like going to be better for the Tesla brand, right? Because like conservatives have been already conditioned to like Tesla, and then now it's like we're bringing back the liberals again, so maybe like it'll be cool to drive a Tesla again. I don't know, like because like
I
right
think
now like people will like key your car in like California, right? Like if you go to anywhere that's super liberal, like people will key your car if you drive a Tesla. So like is that not going to be a thing anymore, do you think?
I mean, I think that they're going to be NPCs, like you said. That's what's going to happen. The majority of people are going to find a way to justify why they like Elon again. I think the number one issue for the Democratic Party is hate Trump, and that's all they kind of have. And I think if Trump and Elon keep feuding, it's just gonna like make Democrats like Elon. But I think the smartest thing Elon can do is not work with the Democrats because they have no substance right now. And until the Democrats have like a proper economic message and show that they could take like political issues seriously and not just make everything about DEI or everything about like some issue that they're trying to divide people or whatever. Like I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think the Democrats are going to like grow up in this moment. So I think that it's about Elon just kind of shaming Washington for what it is. They're all bad. They've all been a part of it. They've all contributed to this problem. The fiscal crisis is a bipartisan issue, and Elon is finally pulling the plug on the GOP as he did with the Democrats a couple of years ago.
All right. Well, one last point, and then we got to move on. What do you think the chances are that this whole thing was rigged or like staged? I shouldn't say rigged, but like staged, right? Like, what if I don't know, Trump needed an excuse to kind of flip on this one big beautiful bill, and like he didn't want to seem like he just randomly changed his mind, and then now if he is like, okay, you know what, I thought about this big beautiful bill and I actually don't like a lot of what's in it, and then now he has an excuse, right? He could say, actually I talked to Elon and then he told me about all these like, like bad things about it, and then now I don't like it anymore, and then that gives them like an exit, kind of an exit stage left sort of like option, right? Whereas before, if he just randomly flipped on it, people are going to criticize him for it. Like, what do you think that like maybe he called Elon and be like, hey, let's pretend to have like a divorce so that we can like pull a fast one, and then I can back out of this bill because I actually didn't read it, and then now that I've read it, it's actually pretty bad. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I believe to a certain point it was staged. I just don't think that like it was staged between Elon and Trump. I think Elon like decided that the way to do this would be to like coordinate with people within the White House who are his allies on this issue, but not actually like coordinate it with Trump. And I think that's basically what happened. I think there's forces within the White House that are very happy this is happening right now, and they probably knew Elon was about to do this. And I think that Trump is genuinely surprised that Elon is like turning on him so quickly. But this is Elon's style, like the way he talks about guys like Bill Gates and his colleagues and stuff. Like he turns on people very quickly. He's really, really eager to use like X as a tool to go after people who are often his like colleagues and allies. Like Elon is just that kind of abrasive dude, and I don't think that is staged between him and Trump. No, I don't think Trump knew, but I think that a lot of people in Trump's inner circle are supportive of what's happening. And I think
Yeah.
it was staged from the point of view like the All In podcast like set this up like the last like 3 weeks. I think it's staged where like the Silicon Valley guys that are like feeling they're losing influence over this White House, especially over the Doge issue, like set this up. They're like, Elon, when you're like 6 month contracts up, you're gonna have to come back and like be abrasive like you usually are. And Elon's willing to do it.
Yeah, so you're saying maybe David Sachs had a hand in this, right? Because like people on X were like meme posting about David Sachs and how he must feel right now, and like the common meme that I've seen is like the like Troy from Community, like he comes back with the pizza and like everything's on fire and people are doing like CPR on like unconscious people on the floor. Like like is that what David Sachs is like right now, or maybe as you suggested, maybe he like actually is the architect behind all of this, and this was all going according to David Sachs's plan.
I think that guys like David Sachs and Peter Thiel are totally supportive of what Elon is doing right now, and they won't admit it. Like David Sachs won't admit it tomorrow on the podcast. He'll say like he came up with a good reason why Trump is right about the pork bill last week, and I think that he'll keep going on with those lines because he still works in the White House. But yeah, I think David Sachs completely knows what Elon's doing. They probably planned it out. Peter Thiel's probably on board. I even think that guys like Basent are on board. I think like we already know that there's like a conflict between Basent and like Navarro and these guys, and I think that like whether it was like staged, no, Elon's a lone wolf. He did it on his own, but I think David Sachs and Peter Thiel and Basent are probably pretty happy about it. That's what I think.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to kind of watch this story and see how it develops. All right, so if you're ready, let's move on to the next story of tonight. There's another controversy. This one a little bit more serious. It's about Bitcoin again, but instead of dancing cows, we are going to talk about BIP177. So, just to set our audience up for the background of this, so I'm going to talk about both the pros and the cons, and I'm going to try to be as unbiased as possible. And then, of course, I do have my own opinions, which I'll insert at the end, but not before we pass the mic to Sunil, who probably also has pretty strong opinions about this, right? So what is BIP 177? Put basically, it's just renaming Satoshis or Sats to Bitcoin. And you're like, okay, well, what does that mean, right? So one Bitcoin right now is, if you divide it by 8 decimal points, which is the smallest unit, that's one Satoshi. And that's so 100 million Satoshis is worth one Bitcoin. And some people say that this is an issue because one Bitcoin is still worth over $100,000 US dollars, even though it's been dropping a bit as of this recording. It's still worth over 100K. So a lot of beginners get confused around this, right? Because they're like, oh, I'm not going to buy Bitcoin because I don't have 100K, where they don't know that they can buy one Satoshi at a time, which one Satoshi, even at 100K, one Satoshi is worth less than a cent. It's like a tenth of a cent. So you can buy 10 Satoshis with 1 cent, but people don't know that. So that's the first issue. And then the second issue is that, you have Bitcoin and then you have Satoshis, and then people think that is two different things. I know, like, the counter argument to that is that you have dollars and you have cents, and then those are also two different words, but people are used to that. And people are not used to Satoshis versus Bitcoin. So they might hear about Bitcoin first, but then they don't make that connection in their head that Satoshis are the same thing as Bitcoin. And then like, they don't, it doesn't mesh, right? It sounds like they're two different things. It's like, oh, you told me I was buying Bitcoin and now I'm buying Satoshis. Like, what the heck? But they're the same thing in reality, right? So those are the kind of issues. And the issue is that, like, basically, if you're paying somebody, let's say, right, with Satoshis, with Bitcoin, it's impossible to actually use Bitcoin as a unit because, like, unless you're buying like a house or something, if you're buying a coffee, you can't just like send somebody 0.00001 Bitcoin. Like, there's too many zeros and it's too easy to miss, right? So you have to use Sats as a unit. And then that has all the problems that I just described. So with BIP 177, what people are suggesting is that, hey, let's just drop the whole Sats thing. Let's redenominate Bitcoin to be one Sat. So one Bitcoin now would be worth 100 million Bitcoins, and one Sat would be one Bitcoin. And then that way, we can just use Bitcoin for everything. And the argument for it is that, apart from the reasons I just mentioned, was, Satoshi Nakamoto, the inventor of Bitcoin, originally envisioned Bitcoin as a means of payment, right? I know people are using it as a store of value, and that's kind of the main selling point of Bitcoin right now, that you're supposed to hold on to it. You don't sell your Bitcoin. But I think transactions as a medium of exchange, that's actually a large part of Bitcoin's kind of, reason for existence, raison d'être, whatever you say it, the French thing. So using it for payment is an important part of Bitcoin. And if we don't, like, we can't use 0 point, like the decimals, if we can't send people like 0.0001 Bitcoin because that's too confusing, then we have to work with Sats, and then why don't we just use Bitcoin? So this is kind of the argument for it. And then this is actually something that's being endorsed by Jack Dorsey, which I didn't expect him to actually endorse this at first, because, to be honest, when I first heard of this idea, it kind of sounded stupid to me. It sounded ridiculous, and I was like, nah, no way. But then, like, Jack Dorsey started promoting it and endorsing it, and then now I'm kind of more ambivalent to it, and I'm starting to see some merit in this. I'm not like fully ready to fully endorse it yet, but I can definitely see how this is maybe an attractive idea. So I shared this picture in the docket with you, Sunil. You can see that this is a picture from Square, or Block, Jack Dorsey's company, where they announced that they're adding the option to pay in Bitcoin to all Square terminals, which is great. That's the main announcement, but they baked in this kind of little Easter egg for BIP 177, where you can see that 9,256 Bitcoins, not Satoshis, but actually using the Bitcoin symbol, is only worth $10. And of course, it's not actually worth only $10. Like 9,000 Bitcoins is like, more fortune than like more money than what some countries have. Uh, is actually 9,000 Satoshis, but they just renamed it to Bitcoin. So this is in reality what it would look like if BIP 177 was implemented. Now, obviously, let's talk about some of the cons. The cons is you're kind of changing the base of Bitcoin, so it seems like you're inflating Bitcoin, which is not actually, like, you're not actually inflating it, but it's just like the naming scheme, right? So we've been telling people that there's only 21 million Bitcoin, and then if we do this rebase, then we're gonna go from 21 million Bitcoins in existence to 2.1 quadrillion, right? So that's 2100 trillion Bitcoins, which is how many Satoshis that's out there already. Like, this is, again, we're just renaming Satoshis to Bitcoin, right? But it seems like, before we were telling people that there's only 21 million, and then now there's all of a sudden 2.1 quadrillion. Like, what's going on? So that's kind of the biggest con, I would say, is that it also adds some confusion, where the hard cap is like not as emphasized as much. And I think that that's really important, that we emphasize that Bitcoin is scarce and limited. So this kind of takes away from that. So that's, and also number two is just, people in Bitcoin are very conservative. I know it doesn't seem like it to normies who aren't in the Bitcoin space, that I would call Bitcoiners conservative. But Bitcoiners are actually the most, some of the, I don't mean like socially conservative. I just mean like, conservative in the way that they don't want change to the Bitcoin system, right? So any new idea in Bitcoin is scrutinized over and over again. And only like when we absolutely know that it's not gonna, like, harm Bitcoin in any way, then that change is implemented. At least that's kind of the idea, right? Whereas if you go to like Solana or Ethereum or other blockchains, is kind of move fast and break things. Bitcoiners are kind of the opposite of that. It's like, don't fix what's not broken, and like really think about changes. And this, even though it's a naming scheme, it does in some ways fundamentally change Bitcoin, because you're rebasing the unit, right? So I've just gone through a lot of pros and cons to this BIP 177 proposal. So I'm curious to hear what you think, Sunil, of this.
A lot of Bitcoiners know that money has like three use cases: it's a store of value, it's a medium of exchange, and a unit of measure. Um, I think that Bitcoin has like successfully achieve the store of value. Like, it is a store of value. People like Larry Fink compare it, call it digital gold, and call it a store of value. It's being used by people like Michael Saylor as a store of value. Even like Elon and Tesla is being used as a store of value. So I think like it's achieved that, and I think it's always been like that's like the use case that most Bitcoiners work off of. I don't think Bitcoin has like fully achieved the medium of exchange, but it is a medium of exchange because you can use Bitcoin to buy things, especially like within the Bitcoin circular economy. But even then, it's not like fully a medium of exchange because I'm only interested in denominating Bitcoin in US or Canadian dollars when I'm making purchases with it. And I make purchases with it all the time. I'm not interested at all in what and how many sats I'm spending. I'm not interested at all in how many Bitcoin I'm spending. I know that I'm spending Bitcoin in Sats, but I'm only actually interested in how much I'm spending valued in US dollars. So like even for myself, like an avid Bitcoiner, it has not fulfilled the use case of medium of exchange to the point of view where I care. It is a medium of exchange for me. I generally don't want to spend my Bitcoin, but I do spend it for fun sometimes. But I don't really care how much Sats I'm spending. I care how much US. I still care how much US dollars I'm spending. So like in terms of the unit of measure, like that has not been achieved. Bitcoin is not a unit of measure. I think it one day will be, but it's not right now. It probably won't be for a while. And I think that like the future of the world is one where most people are going to like the first stage of Bitcoin becoming like money is going to be one where like the US government is able to like rebase their currency around Bitcoin. where Bitcoin, where the U.S. dollar is backed by Bitcoin, or like the Canadian dollar is backed by Bitcoin, where countries continue to use their like base currencies, but are now like creating some kind of guarantee that their money is backed by Bitcoin, just like how money used to be backed by gold. A lot of people still think it is. It's not anymore. But so I think that that's basically the stage we're entering, and I don't think that it matters if like Bitcoin's redenominated or Satoshi's become Bitcoin. Like I don't think that helps the unit of measure thing. Like I think if you do this, people still want to know how much they're spending in US dollars. So I just don't think that this proposal really achieves that, which is what Jack Dorsey wants. Like when I go to my Square app and I can use like Wallet of Satoshi to buy something with my Square app, I really don't care uh how many satoshis I'm sending over, how many Bitcoin I'm sending over. I want, like, if it's a $50 product, I'm spending $50, which means my Bitcoin pile will be reduced by $50. That's how I think about it. And I'm an avid Bitcoiner. That's how Michael Saylor thinks about it. That's how a lot of Bitcoiners think about it. Maybe Jack Dorsey doesn't. So I just don't think it really achieves what Jack Dorsey wants it to achieve. So that's at that point I'm against it, because like I have to be pretty convinced that this change is going to make Bitcoin a unit of measure in the world, and I don't think that this change is going to make us like value oil in Bitcoin. I don't think this thing is going to make us value any substantial product in Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin's always is still going to be off to the side, and the U.S. dollar will still be supreme in the category of unit of measure, and I think it'll probably be supreme for the next 10, 20 years. Um, I think that it's also like cheapens the brand of Bitcoin, because like the 21 million is something that was very intentional. Like Satoshi wanted a Bitcoin to be worth a lot of money in terms of like modern day purchasing power. He didn't want a Bitcoin to be, I spent 1 Bitcoin on a coffee. No, he wanted a Bitcoin to represent something big in the economy. Like 1 Bitcoin is a million, makes you a millionaire or a billionaire. So I think that like telling my friends that there's only 21 million Bitcoin when I'm trying to like orange pill them, and saying there's only 21 million, it's algorithmically guaranteed to be scarce, and there will never be more than 21 million Bitcoin. And then I also use a line that like there are, because there's only 21 million Bitcoin, there's more millionaires in the world than 1 Bitcoin available per millionaire. That's actually a very compelling case. If I switch that to Bitcoin is algorithmically guaranteed to be fixed in supply, and there's only 21 quadrillion of them, I don't think that's going to be a very good marketing play for Bitcoiners. I think that we'll be able to like through I think like that one liner, there's only 21 million Bitcoin and there's not enough millionaires to have 1 Bitcoin each, is a great line, and we lose that line. And I think that's one of the most compelling lines in the marketing of Bitcoin when you're trying to orange pill each other people. So I just think it cheapens the brand. It's kind of like an altcoiner move, and I'm just not for it. And I'll be very disappointed if this proposal passes. I don't expect it to, but I would be very disappointed if it were to pass.
I don't disagree with anything that you said there, but let me just try to play maybe devil's advocate and kind of push back on some of the things that you said, right? So, um, with regards to like, it cheapens the brand, is like, you lose the 21 million kind of thing. Well, the US dollar, let's say we're valuing our net worth in US dollars. So I know we live in Canada, but let's just say like US dollars is kind of, the global reserve currency and what everybody kind of by default gauges their wealth in. Like saying that you're a millionaire in US dollars, like I know people when they say they're a millionaire, they don't have to specify that that it's in US dollars, but that's kind of like a rare thing as well, right? So if we rebase, let's say, Satoshis to Bitcoin, yes, we do lose the I hold 1 out of 21 million line, but then you can say I'm a Bitcoin billionaire, right? that's 10 Bitcoins. That's the equivalent of 10 Bitcoins now, right? Because 1 Bitcoin is 100 million. So if you have 10, then that's a billion. So right now you would say I'm a Satoshi billionaire if you had 10 Bitcoins. But now you can say that I'm just a Bitcoin billionaire. I have 10 billion Bitcoins. So
But being a billionaire should mean something. Like if I'm a billionaire, I should have a lot of power. I should be able to like do so.
Yeah,
I should be
well,
able to. I should have many fancy cars. I
well,
should be
but
living
like,
in a
yeah,
mansion.
that's what I'm saying. Like, if you had 10 bitcoins, then you have a lot of power, right? So like 10 bitcoins become a billion satoshis. So I mean, if you had a billion satoshis, you would be super rich, and that's something that's like complete, like super rare as well. And Bitcoin will go up in value, by the way, right? And so
Mhm.
like eventually, if you say I'm a Bitcoin billionaire, and let's say 177 pushes through and sats become bitcoins, and then you say like I'm a Bitcoin billionaire, and that's equivalent to the previous 1 billion satoshis. That's still a lot of money, and like eventually, let's just say, and Bitcoin, it just needs another 10x from here for 1 satoshi to equal 1 cent. So maybe one day 1 satoshi will be equal to $1. And then that will be really significant if you have a billion satoshis, right? Like, because then you'd have $1 billion. But yeah, I mean, I think that there's you do lose the 1 in 21 million line, but then there's also another line that you could use. You can just say I'm a Bitcoin millionaire, or I'm a Bitcoin billionaire, or I'm a Bitcoin
Yeah,
deca.
but don't you think that cheapens the brand if somebody like me calls himself a billionaire? Because like I clearly don't have like the purchasing power of a billionaire. Like the branding of a billionaire. Like I don't call myself a Bitcoin millionaire, right? Like I have more than a million satoshis, but I don't call myself a Bitcoin millionaire because I
Well,
just think that would cheapen the brand. It would, if I told everybody I'm a Bitcoin millionaire, they'd be like, "Well, why don't you have like a Rolls Royce and a mansion?" Because I would be like, "Well, being a millionaire in Bitcoin doesn't really mean much.
Well,
It's
right
actually really
now,
yeah,
that's the thing, right? Like right now,
yeah,
it doesn't mean much, but Bitcoin's going
right."
to go up, right? Eventually, like this is like kind of, I feel like future proofing it, where one day it will, like if you own a million Satoshis, or a million Bitcoin in this case, if 177 pushes through, that will be the equivalent purchasing power of having $1 million in the future, right? But I know like we're not there yet, but this is kind of like looking forward into the future, right? And that was the second point that I was gonna make, where it's like you're like, oh, I'm not really like, I don't really care how many satoshis I'm paying for a thing. I look at it in dollars, right? And again, it's like right now you do, but Bitcoiners have long envisioned a day where Bitcoin becomes a unit of account, where if you go to a store, like things will actually be priced in Satoshis. The reason why it's not right now is because Bitcoin's too volatile. So, like, the value always changes. So, you don't want to price things in Satoshis because you don't know how much value you're going to get. But let's say if, like, Bitcoin, like the version of Bitcoin right now, hits I don't know, $10 million or something per Bitcoin, right? Then I bet like it won't be as volatile, right? Like the value will stabilize. And then maybe at that point you can price things in Satoshis because the value will be stable enough for you to do so. And then in that case, again, we have the issue of Satoshis versus Bitcoin. And then if we do 177, it kind of future proofs us for that scenario where one day Bitcoin becomes a unit of account. So, like, I'm not disputing anything you said previously. I just think that you're just thinking about what the situation is right now. But what about 10, 20 years from now, right? Where,
But I'd rather just one satoshi equaled 1 cent in the future rather than like 1 Bitcoin equals a quadrillion Bitcoin or whatever the number is. I don't even know. But yeah, I would rather wait for one satoshi to actually be valuable than a situation where I'm like redenominating it and already I'm calling myself a millionaire before I have the purchasing power of a millionaire. You know what I mean? Like I just don't want to fake it. Like I don't want like I don't like I'm 5'6", so I don't want to like wear like I don't want to wear lifts in my shoes and go on the dating scene, and I don't want girls thinking I'm 5'9", and then you like take your shoes off, and then all of a sudden, like so, like it's like, oh, I'm a Bitcoin billionaire. It's like I'm bragging about how rich I am, but then people look it up and they realize a Bitcoin billionaire is nothing. You're worth nothing. I don't want to be like that's like anybody can have that kind of money. That's how much money a house is valued in, or half the value of the house, or whatever, depending on how many Bitcoin you have. Like I just think it's like similar. It's like I'm boasting about my wealth before it even means anything. It's like I'm boasting about my height while I'm wearing my lifts, but then when I take my shoes off 3 weeks later, they're gonna know I'm short, and then what I'm gonna do? It's kind of like that.
Right, but let me ask you this, right? So Samson Mao has predicted that we're gonna see what he calls an omega candle, which will take Bitcoin, the current version of Bitcoin, like not like the rebased version of Bitcoin, but what Bitcoin is right now, 100K, to 1 million, just this year, right? And
Right.
I'm not saying that that's gonna happen, but let's say if Samson Mao is correct, and Bitcoin goes to 1 million, so it does another 10x right now. Like, will your opinion on this change at all? Because your purchasing power, let's just say it's not because of like the US dollar collapsed or like got like, completely diluted. Let's just say like if Bitcoin goes to $1 million and the purchasing power of $1 million is the same as it is right now. So your purchasing power effectively just 10x. Will your opinion on any of this change if that happens this year?
No, because I would still be willing to spend my satoshis, and the whole concept of being like a whole coiner still has a lot of weight in that world, right? Like it doesn't you don't have to redenominate it because I could just say I'm a whole coiner, and if people are like you're a whole coiner, like holy shit, and then everybody's gonna know how much money I have, and then I have to be worried about getting robbed or whatever. But but like yeah, like I would rather just have the label as a whole coiner. I'd rather not redenominate it. Like I want my like at $1 million, I believe a Satoshi equals a cent. So I'd just rather that scenario play out. Like I am a huge believer in. I love Samson Mao. I think he's one of my favorite Bitcoiners because he talks about the Omega candle, and I think the Omega candle still holds a lot of weight in the scenario where I'm a whole coiner when Bitcoin is worth $1 million. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe I'm just like too much like I'm looking into the future too much because in my mind there's gonna be a day where saying that I'm a Satoshi millionaire is the same as saying I'm a millionaire in dollars right now.
Right. Yeah. One day. Yeah.
Yeah, and if that happens one day, then like I can see something like BIP 177 making more sense. But yeah, I mean, I don't fundamentally disagree with you that like if you were to implement it right now, it does kind of cheapen the brand of Bitcoin a little. But is it worth to like cheapen the brand a little now to like kind of maybe future proof Bitcoin and it's kind of you know pricing in the growth before it actually happens? I would
I
say.
mean, I don't think it's really future proofing it because I believe that I think the hyper Bitcoinization is going to happen. I just don't necessarily believe, but I still think human beings might like our governments or whatever, our federations. When we become part of federation, Bitcoin federations, I think our federations will create like an e-cash system, and they'll create a GUI where maybe under the hood we know that I have 0.01113478 Bitcoin, and then that means uh 65 Satoshi bucks or something like that. Like I would rather like set up a GUI that solves the problem of like Satoshis being confusing than have it be like a base layer like proposal. That's kind of where like I'm very much like a purist in that Satoshi meant for there to be 21 million Bitcoin, and I want to adhere to that standard that he created. Like I just really want to adhere to that. It's like it's like there's like standards in history when like they set up the marathon at the Olympics, it was like based on how long it took to run around like the building, and they still go by that standard and they just don't go around it, and that's how everybody understands it, and that's just how it's gonna happen. Like sometimes like I just think that these things are really important. So like Bitcoin was founded by Immaculate Conception. Satoshi Nakamoto founded Bitcoin and then disappeared from the world, and he was intentional on what a Bitcoin was valued at, and I don't think we should change it. I'm just kind of a purist in that way. I feel like Satoshi had a reason to denominate it where there's only 21 million Bitcoin. I feel like there is something to that, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway A. Like he's never
Yeah,
with that stock, and it's
yeah,
like $800,000 per share
yeah.
now or something. Like it's gonna hit 1 million pretty soon. I would
And
think.
there's been a lot of pressure to split it, and it hasn't really hurt the company. Like I hate stock splits. I'm hugely against them. Like when Tesla stock split, like I remember when like a Tesla share was valued at like $4,000 for a short period of time. I thought that was awesome to have the share valued at $4,000. I was very disappointed. I thought it cheapened the share count. Like I think that stock splits kind of cheapened the brand of the stock. I'd rather my Tesla be worth $100,000 a share one day, but but there's like a culture of like stock splitting to make it much more easier for like retail investors to get access to the funds, to get access to the asset. And I kind of have like a Warren Buffett view on like Bitcoin. Like I don't want to redenominate it, and I think that you could still redenominate Bitcoin like through a GUI. You can create eCash and you can redenominate it in US dollars. You can redenominate it in Canadian dollars, or you can redenominate it in some kind of future money, and then it's all backed by Bitcoin in the bottom. Like I think that you can solve a lot of like the future proofing that you're talking about could be solved through like software solutions that don't impact the base layer of the protocol.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And actually, like, uh, I was at Vegas and I got these from a
Nice.
vendor called Offline Cash, where they make like these bearer notes that have like
Mhm.
the little NFC chip in it, where you can like actually load up your Bitcoin with it. And then this is actually, it says one, but obviously like it's gonna be
Mhm.
a pretty hard task to fill it with one Bitcoin. So
Yeah,
it's not one Bitcoin, it's 1 milli Bitcoin, which is 1,000th of a Bitcoin. So
right.
0.001 Bitcoin, which is, I don't know, worth $100 right now, which is a lot more palatable than doing putting 100K inside of like a little paper bill. So yeah, I mean, you can use milli Bitcoin as well, I guess, and that maybe is a compromise solution.
I
Uh,
think that's a good use. Like that's a good like use case. Like it's showing that governments can create money. Like governments can create a money that like is based off of Bitcoin, and like true Bitcoiners know how much Bitcoin is denominated to each note. But the plebs who are just going to use money the way they use money today, they're just going to go with whatever unit like their government sets for them, and they're going to be happy with that probably. Like there's going to be one day where the majority of Bitcoiners don't care about the store of value; they just care about using it as money. They care about getting paid in Bitcoin. So I think that like that's a good use case that you're showing off that shows that like human beings themselves can figure out how to redenominate Bitcoin to make sense for their day-to-day purchases.
yeah,
It can,
it's definitely a debate. I mean, I'm still thinking about it, and I gotta say, I was pretty against this in the beginning, but I saw some of the like arguments for it, and some of them are slightly convincing, I have to admit. But yeah, as I said, I'm not endorsing either direction right now. I'm still making up my mind. It's interesting for sure, but I guess that's a conversation that a lot of people are going to have in the coming
for
days.
sure.
Yeah, we'll have to see.
And
So
I can see a redenomination of Bitcoin being in the future. I'm just not. I guess I'm not ready for it yet. That's kind of my view.
mhm. Yeah, maybe when like one Satoshi hits $1,
Maybe,
like
yeah.
it'll change my mind.
Yeah.
All right. If that's all we have, let's move on to our final story of tonight. If you are ready.
Yep.
So our final story of tonight is Australia. So we don't talk about Australia pretty very often on this show. I don't think we've actually ever talked about Australia, but we must talk about Australia tonight because they're kind of pioneering a policy, a tax policy that, in my opinion, is pretty bad. And I think this sets a really bad example for other so-called Western democratic countries going forward. And is this how it's going to be like for Canada maybe one day, or for the US? We'll have to see, right? But what is this policy? So Australia is going to implement a unrealized capital gains tax if nothing changes between now and July 1st, which is when this policy is scheduled to take effect. So in case you guys don't know what an unrealized capital gains tax is exactly what it sounds like. It's you have, let's say, a stock, an asset. It doesn't have to be a stock, but just any asset. It goes up. You haven't sold it, and the government's like, "Oh, you made too much money on paper. Please give us tax." And this is like wrong on a lot of levels, but I'll explain that later. But this is what Australia is trying to do, right? So according to this article, Australia is trying to tax individuals holding assets more than 3 million Australian dollars, which is worth about 2 million US dollars. And that tax rate is going to be taxed at 15% for that portion that increases above that $2 million or 3 million Australian dollars. And the bad thing about it is that this is actually really broad, right? So it includes stocks, it includes, I'm not sure if it includes housing, which if it does is really bad, but this article, I don't think it mentions housing specifically, but it does mention Bitcoin. And good luck taxing that. Like, people are going to lose it left and right in various boating accidents. But let's just say if the government somehow, tracks you down, then yeah, Bitcoin is going to get taxed too. And it's going to be, it's good. Yeah, it's a pretty broad kind of tax policy, as I mentioned. And this is only one. This is like the first law that has actually kind of being prepared to be actually implemented. So if you recall, back during the campaign season in 2024 in the United States, this was something that the Kamala Harris campaign proposed. The Democrats proposed that they wanted to do a unrealized capital gains tax. And this had some support from, the very hard left in the United States. But when that policy was announced, even a lot of people like Mark Cuban, who was a pretty staunch supporter of Kamala Harris and the Democrats, and I'm pretty sure he still is, but even Mark Cuban came out against that idea, saying that this was a bad idea. And yeah, it wasn't just Mark Cuban. It was a lot of Democrats were like, hey, let's not do this. And it was controversial enough that it eventually got scrapped. But just the fact that the Democrats thought it was a good idea to put this idea out in the first place, just to test the waters, if anything, shows that at least there is an appetite among a faction in the Democratic Party in the United States who's willing to potentially take that step. But Australia kind of beat them to the punch, where Australia actually had an election recently too. And it was a very similar situation to Canada, actually. So it was the case where the right-leaning candidate was leading in the polls, and then Trump came along and tariffed everybody. And then for various reasons or another, like I think maybe there was some like campaign gaffes by the right-leaning candidate as well. I didn't follow that election super closely, so I don't know exactly what happened, but to my understanding, was very similar to Canada, where it's mainly Trump that was the tariffs imposed by Trump was the main campaign issue. And then the left just surged. And yeah, the left-leaning party in Australia, the Labour Party, won a majority. So in fact, the Conservative, like they actually in Australia, which it's really confusing because I think the Australian Conservatives are called the Liberals, but they're actually Conservatives. But anyways, that party dropped a lot in support, so they actually lost seats. So yeah, this is one of the first acts by the new Labour Party, and we can see that what I like to call alt-left policies being implemented. And I don't know if that triggers some people, but in my mind, implementing an unrealized capital gains tax is a pretty alt-left, let's just say communism-esque idea. I don't know if anyone wants to fight me on that, but that's just my opinion. So yeah, my question to you, Sunil, is what do you think of this idea in general of unrealized gains tax? Do you agree that it's as bad as I'm saying it is? And do you think that such policies may be coming to places like Canada, which we just had an election too, and the Liberals they didn't win a majority, but they got pretty darn close to a majority, and we have a government that seems willing to kind of increase or increase spending, which will inevitably, in my opinion, cause increasing taxes to pay for that spending. Even though that the Liberals are trying to say we're cutting taxes, but I don't know. I just think that they're gonna eventually have to increase taxes the way that they're spending. So, do you see something like this coming to Canada? And what do you think of this idea of the unrealized capital gains tax as a whole?
I mean, I guess I'll answer the second question first. Is that like I do think that it's a signal that this kind of policy is coming to Canada, or at least like there's going to be noise about this kind of policy in Canada down the road. The only saving grace for Canada is they did try something similar where they tried to go after like capital gains taxes of like small business owners. They tried to increase capital gains taxes on like the assets the small business owners had, which is basically a tax grab for the rich, which is kind of how it was like marketed as. Um, and the Liberal government it kind of got such bad press. The Liberal government had to walk it back the second Mark Carney was elected leader of the Liberal Party in the leadership race. So I would expect that like the one positive thing from the Canadian point of view is that the Liberal Party may have peaked in the amount of like tax the rich rhetoric they can get away with, because it kind of did backfire when people started realizing that tax the rich didn't actually mean taxing like oligarchs with like generational wealth, because those people could easily move their money. Like the Trudeaus of this country would not be taxed in this kind of situation, because these guys can move their money into property and that kind of stuff overseas, and it's very easy for them to facilitate those kinds of decisions. So what ends up happening is that tax the rich ends up being taxes on lawyers and doctors. And I mean, I don't think the lawyers. I think the people often like there are people who look at lawyers and doctors as like spoiled rich people, but like I think most people are actually reasonable. They don't think of doctors as like spoiled rich people. They think of them as like wealthy people who like should be getting paid well for their jobs, and they're not that rich. They don't have generational wealth necessarily. Maybe they could set their kids up with like a house or something like that, but they're not like it's not generational wealth where like 4 or 5 generations of that family are gonna be like living as like ritzy lifestyles. So I think that like I think the average voter is actually a lot more sophisticated than like leftist politicians are willing to admit, and don't necessarily buy this rhetoric as much as they used to. I get that it's a good political talking point, and I even believe that we should be taxing the rich to pay for things like healthcare and stuff. But I've seen this like experiment of like slowly increasing taxes on the rich being implemented in Canada for some years, and what I've noticed is that the rich never get taxed. It's always the upper middle class that get taxed. So I think that this kind of policy could backfire really significantly in a place like Australia or Canada. Like if you're the kind of individual who like made an upper middle class salary, bought a nice house in the 1970s and 80s, and now your house is worth $3-4 million because you happen to live in Vancouver, and now the government's gonna like tax your home equity, which most people, even with like $2-3 million in houses in Canada, are cash poor, like all their equities in their house. So like you can't like start selling off a section of your home to pay your government tax bill every year. Like it's a disastrous policy that's going to be a disaster for like fairly normal people. Yes, they might be in the nicer neighborhoods in like the GTA or whatever, but they're not necessarily the nicest neighborhoods that like doctors and lawyers and upper middle class people live in. They're not the utmost like ritziest places with like gated communities and stuff. Like the gated communities and people who are living like half their year on a yacht in Italy are going to be able to find a way to hide their money and be able to find a way to legally move their money out of the Canadian system if this kind of policy was to reach Canada. So I just think the capital flight would be disastrous, because like Australia is in America, where like somebody like Elon Musk is arguably tied to America. So if you try to confiscate his wealth, like where is he going to go? Like he doesn't really have anywhere to go. It's not easy to take like Elon Musk $200 billion fortune and move it to Australia or move it to like Italy or something. Like, where is he going to go? He can't really go anywhere. If America decides to start taxing unrealized capital gains, people like Elon would just start selling their company. It would take away motivation for him to be a workaholic who like builds amazing products. It would take a motivation from a lot of like high tech billionaires, and it would backfire because the people who would ultimately be the most affected by the taxes would be upper middle class people who are well-to-do individuals, but not like generational wealth type individuals. So I think it's a fairly stupid policy. I understand why it like resonates with certain voters. I understand why like the policies of tax the rich became popular policies in terms of rhetoric, but like there's a reason why they never get implemented properly. Like there's a reason why there has never been a wealth tax that's been implemented anywhere in the world over like something like trivial like 0.1%. Like those are the kinds of wealth taxes that have been successful where they're so low that it's very easy for people to pay their wealth tax. The kinds of wealth taxes, like a wealth tax is anywhere over 1% or 2% or 5% or 10%. Like these kinds of tax would be so burdensome for capital allocators that you would have a society that essentially no longer had capital allocators. And if you want to and there's a lot of leftists that don't understand the value of capital allocators in society. And that's kind of the issue I have always had with the left, even when I was a part of the left. I always had problems with this issue where people, it's like valuing Elon Musk by the value of his company is what idiots do. Like people who actually understand money know that like Elon Musk doesn't actually have $250 billion of spending power. If he started selling his shares to buy fancy things, the value of his company would start to crash, and then the value of his network would crash. So like it's a little tough to understand why Elon doesn't actually have $200 billion of purchasing power, and there's a lot of people like within like the institutional leftist world that don't really understand this. And the last point I'll make is that tax revenues in the Western world have never been higher. They like the amount of taxes that governments are taking from their citizens have never been higher. Yet somehow, like the quality of our social services have eroded to the point where like people like me don't even want them anymore. As somebody who was like an avid socialist for most of my life, I'm like, screw these policies, just get rid of all of them because all our social services suck anyways, and you're taxing like middle class people at 50% of their earnings now. So like, what's the point of even having these social services? Like, and this is a world where like our tax revenue has never been higher. So the problem isn't, or it's not a revenue problem. Like the political left are obsessed with increasing revenue to pay for their programs, but the problem is that the kinds of people who work in government administration often happen to be incompetent. They're not the kind of people who are going to be able to uh, give people their money's worth in services. You can convince people that expanding government can make their lives better, and there are examples historically where it can. Like giving people free healthcare in most Western countries did make people's lives better, but there's like a limit to these things. There's an optimal point. There's like if anybody wants to look into it, look up the Laffer curve. There's an optimal tax revenue for society, and if you cross that Laffer curve, it actually starts to erode your revenue as a society. Like for example, this is going to trigger a lot of people, but Trump's tax cuts in 2017 or 2018, whenever they were implemented, or tax cuts on not just the wealthy but most Americans, and it actually increased American tax revenue because it incentivized people paying taxes. Like I'll give you one example. It incentivized big US corporations that had money parked overseas in Europe that didn't want to get double taxed on their income, where they're taxed in Europe and then taxed in the United States. They were actually the Trump administration gave them a tax holiday and said, "Bring your money back to America." And then those companies started bringing their money back to American bank accounts tax free, which actually effectively rose America's tax revenue over an 8-year period afterwards. So like taxing the rich, maximizing revenue is a very simplistic noob way of thinking about like maximizing standard of living in a society. But the left is addicted to this idea that they must tax revenue and give that money to government administrators who we increasingly have all realized in our society that these government administrators are just wasting our money for the most part. And that's kind of how I think about the entire topic and the trends with unrealized capital gains taxes.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And yeah, like you brought up a good point about the Laffer curve. It's like I see this problem everywhere among the political left in not just Canada, but all the Western democratic countries. Is like the leftist parties and the movements, they have trouble understanding the idea that you can actually lower taxes and actually increase tax revenue at the same time. Like that's possible, but it takes a little bit of like extra thinking, right? Like why does that happen? Well, when you lower taxes, it increases economic activity, and then if that activity increases, you're not lowering it to zero, right? There's still a tax rate on those economic activities. If you get more of it, like if you get more smaller payments, that could add up to like one big payment. And this is what I think a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their heads around, but it's actually not that complicated of a concept, in my opinion, right? And you don't have to do all this like crazy stuff like taxing unrealized capital gains, which I'll just say, like, left versus right, ideology aside, just logically, this doesn't make sense, right? So I'll give you an example, right? If, let's say, unrealized capital gains tax was a thing, I go to the dollar store, I buy a picture, right? Like just like a random dollar store AI art painting that costs the manufacturer like 50 cents to make. I buy that painting for $5, right? Like, or something trivial. And then the government the next day comes to my house. The CRA, or I guess in the US would be the IRS. The IRS sends a person to my house and says that you have a one of a kind, Microsoft Copilot generated AI art that has never been before seen in this world, and there'll never be anything like it again. It's one of a kind. That picture is worth $1 million. And I say, no, it's not. I just bought it from the dollar store for $5. And then the government agent just goes, well, between yesterday and today, the value increased to $1 million. So you owe us, let's say, 15%. So you owe us $150,000, because like your cost basis was basically nothing compared to, like, your cost basis was 5, and then now it's $1 million. So effectively, you owe us $150,000. And then, like, what are you gonna say? Like, if you're the owner of that painting, right? Let's say if I bought the painting, what am I gonna say to the agent, right? Like, there's nothing I can say because it's unrealized, right? So I can't dispute that price, because, like, in order to like disprove it, like, there's no way I can disprove it. I can actually prove it if I manage to sell it for $1 million, but, like, I can't disprove it. So that's the problem, right? Like, price is set on the margin, which means that, like, in order to set a price, you actually need at least one transaction that occurred at that price to set the price for a thing. Because, like, you can set a limit order for anything you want. Like, you can buy one share of a random penny stock that's worth like 50, like, I don't know, like 5 cents or something, and then you set a limit sell at $1 million. So if you say this stock, if it goes from 5 cents to $1 million, I'm going to sell it. Like, you can set those limit orders all day if you want. That doesn't mean it's going to fill. It's not going to ever fill, right? But on paper, it seems like, you have something that you bought for 5 cents that is maybe potentially worth $1 million. Who knows, right? Maybe one person will be crazy enough to buy your stock for $1 million. You can't say that that's impossible, because that's theoretically possible. So this is the problem with unrealized capital gains, right? Like, the gains, the so-called gains, are ethereal, right? Like, they're up in the air. It's all smoke and mirrors. There's nothing material about it. And it's not until you actually sell and realize the gains that you have something material, i.e. the cash that you got from the sale, to actually pay the tax. So this is why, like, the whole idea of unrealized capital gains, it just opens a whole can of worms, because now, like, anyone can set any price for any asset, and tax, and if the government's doing it, they can tax you on that basis. So they can tax you on anything for any price for any amount, and it'll be
Yes,
leaving.
it's clearly it's very illiberal. So like, if Elon, when Tesla was worth like $490 per share, is like, are you gonna tax Elon at that moment, or are you gonna tax him when it crashes back down to $220 or whatever? It's just like yeah, it's purely on the judgment of some like tax agent like sitting in a dark room like deciding when he's gonna like confiscate wealth from individuals. And I'm using Elon because and he's the richest man in the world, but like that's true for like if there's like, that's true for the Toronto housing market. Like houses can jump in price by $400,000 because of a bubble in the year, and then are they just going to start taxing everybody at like last year's value before the housing prices crashed again? They came back down. Like it's pretty ridiculous. It becomes in a very illiberal power, and it gives too much power to tax agents at that point. Like there's going to be people who use that power in improper ways.
Yeah, and even if you mandate that the price has to be based on like an actual sale that occurred at that like at a specific date, but it doesn't have to be your asset. So for example, let's say if you're trading a stock, right? Let's say it's Tesla stock, and then I'm like an IRS agent who's trying to tax Elon Musk. So I like get one of my friends to sell me a Tesla stock. So like I would at 11:59, like on the market. I know like the market's not open at 11:59, but let's say we have 24-hour trading at 11:59 on December 31st or something. I arranged with my friend to buy one share of Tesla from him for $1 million, just so that I can say, hey, look, there's one sale that occurred at this exact cutoff time where we take the sample of the price, and there's one sale, and Tesla sold for $1 million per share, and I can prove that that transaction happened because I sold I bought one share from my friend for $1 million, and that's a real sale. So we're gonna tax you, Elon, on the basis of $1 million per share for Tesla. Like you could do that, right? And like there's nothing that's technically stopping you. Whereas like if unrealized capital gains is a thing, whereas before, like it's like right now without the unrealized capital gains crap, like it has to be based on your sale specifically, right? But like if it's based on anyone's sale, if it's just based on like what the market price is because it's unrealized, then you can base it off of anything. Then let me just do one share, right? Like I'll just arrange a share, a sale for one share for $1 million, and then what are you gonna do, right? I can prove that that transaction occurred, right? That was the price. You had 1 minute, and if you got lucky and front ran my friend, you could have sold one share to me for $1 million, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to the kinds of people who like actually support this policy. I would be interested to know. Like, have you ever like gone on a stock exchange and purchased anything? Like, do you have any like actual like experience like purchasing an asset, or are you just like jealous of successful people? And like, I don't think people really grasp what happens in a society if you disincentivize asset purchases. Like, the most successful society in the world are ones where the government encourages the citizens to buy assets. They're not the societies where the government wants to own all the assets themselves. It just doesn't make any sense. If you're not incentivizing asset ownership and you're not incentivizing capital allocation, you're incentivizing a system where government's allocating all the capital. Like you called it communism, that's kind of what it is. So yeah, I mean, I just don't think that the people who are like pushing these policies have really grasped what it means in the long run. Uh, there's a lot of people who are just like pissed off wage slaves, and they kind of want to blame successful people who have been able to navigate the system as the reason why they're wage slaves, rather than like finding a way to get out of their terrible wage slave situation. Like even in Canada, where like I would say that our economic situation isn't very good, people like me who come out of like working class backgrounds, like we can like build wealth using a regular day job by saving our money in things like the stock market or Bitcoin. We can like become relatively like comfortable individuals by working hard in terms of saving our money and buying like smart assets. Nobody gave me anything. I'm not like a multi-millionaire or billionaire. I'm not trying to mark myself as like super successful, but I'm successful enough in my life that I can like say that I'm like very I'm very comfortable being like a small time capital allocator. I'm very comfortable with being able to like use my day job to achieve that. Um, I don't think that like wage slaves that are pissed, the kinds of people who are pissed off at capital allocators recognize that it would be individuals like me to save money out of my like $2,000-3,000 paychecks, um, who are the ones who are going to be taxed by this situation. It's not going to be like the oligarch who lives in his like mansion that gets impacted by this.
Yeah, and that is the unfortunate thing, right? I think the government is, like in this case in Australia, is kind of playing on people's ignorance of how the financial system works, and it's actually gonna end up hurting, like you said, the working class people the most, because if you do this, then everyone who has over $3 million Australian dollars is gonna flee Australia.
Mhm.
And then if you, like, people are saying like eat the rich, like we hate the rich. Like, do you really hate the rich? Do you want all of them to leave? Because that's an option, right? But
Yeah,
I'm not sure if anyone is actually ready to bear the consequences of living. You're literally asking to live in a country where there are no rich people. Like, is that really what you want?
yeah,
Like, say that slowly. Like, I want to live in a country with no rich people. Like, say that slowly 3 times
yeah.
and think about if that's actually what you want, right? Because I think if people just calm down a bit and just actually think about whether they want to live in a country where there are no rich people, they, like, you could go to, like, what country has no rich people? Like, I don't know, sub-Saharan African countries. I mean, even they have rich people, but like, up on the top. But like, a lot of these, like, underdeveloped countries, if you go, like, just walk down the street in like a random town, like there's poverty everywhere, right?
Mhm.
So I don't think that uh, people in the West really want that. And
No.
like, yeah, people are not, like, because people in the countries like Australia, Canada, US, generally have been living a much higher quality of life compared to most of the rest of the world, and I don't think people are prepared to deal with the consequences of what it's like to live in a country where it's actually poverty stricken,
And
and
people who come from like middle class backgrounds and even like lower middle class backgrounds whose parents lived in these countries are not supportive of these kinds of policies. Like it's individuals who like have had comfortable lives in North America and have been able to like buy a house with like like a normal job that have that level of comfort that like people like our parents didn't have when they lived in their home countries, who used to have these like nonsensical policies. And what ended up happening in places like India and China is that like successful people just left and they moved to places like Canada and America, because Canada and America lets you own assets and they don't like restrict your assets. They don't restrict you like leaving like moving your assets around the world. Like people value freedom, and like the most successful people in like repressive countries like China or what India used to be uh, during like the 1950s and 60s, where it was basically a democratically socialist country. Like they just lost their most talented individuals. They didn't like they didn't keep their talented people in the country. They just left for freer societies. So like I mean that a version of that can happen to a country like Canada that used to be a recipient of this talent.
yeah, and I'm also wondering how this law in Australia doesn't violate their constitution, because I'm not an expert in Australian law by any means, but I know, like, in Canada and the United States, there are laws against unreasonable search and seizure, right?
Right.
And I think that an unrealized capital gains tax, you can make a very good argument, and this is exactly what happened in the United States, where a lot of constitutional lawyers in the US were saying when Kamala Harris proposed this, that like this is not implementable. Like
Mhm.
if Kamala got elected and she tried to do this, the Supreme Court would like strike it down, because again, like I said, with the example with the AI painting, that you can buy a painting for $5, and then the government could say it's actually worth $1 million, pay up, right?
Mhm.
And then, like, that would be pretty clearly like unreasonable search and seizure, right? Because you're seizing people's assets. You're seizing like, I don't know, $150,000 off of something that like everybody knows is worth not that much, is worth like $5, but like you can just say that is worth $1 million, right? Like that's unreasonable, and you can do that for any asset at any time if you're the government. And yeah, it's crazy to see that Australia is actually doing this, and I wonder if there's constitutional, if they have something in their constitution that prevents this, and if there is, are there like lawyers trying to, sue the government and trying to like put it up to the Australian Supreme Court, and if it does get there, like, will they strike it down? Like, because I don't know, something like this. Like, I know it probably never fly in the United States, and I hope it doesn't fly in Canada. But man, this it's pretty crazy news.
You're just gonna incentivize people to like put their money in like precious metals or Bitcoin, and like you could already like put your money in Bitcoin and have the government not know about it. Like if I buy most of the Bitcoin I purchased, the CRA could track it, but like I can buy Bitcoin at vending machines. I don't need to buy Bitcoin through like legal exchanges. So if government spends like a couple of years rumbling about these kinds of policies, and I find out that they're going to spend the next 2 years instituting these policies, and I'm starting to make different decisions on how I store my wealth, because I'm not actually that interested in having to sell 15% of my assets every year. Like I have enough to be comfortable, but I don't have enough to like be comfortable if that's the scenario I'm living in. So I'd probably front run my sales and start putting my Bitcoin into cold storage in a way where the government can't track it. And if you want to sit around tracking like a few million Bitcoiners in Canada and trying to find out how much money you have, like best of luck. Like it's going to take you a few decades to get my money if you're ever going to get it. But like you said, there's probably already constitutional law and precedent and legal system that makes it really hard for them to implement this, which is probably why the Liberal government walked it back so quickly. And I mean, our tax was more like not an unrealized capital gains tax, but it kind of felt that way for a lot of business owners who use their business investment accounts as their nest egg for their retirement. So now the government was asking people to like take their retirement money and start sending it to the government before they even retired. And that policy backfired fairly quickly in Canada. It actually hurt Trudeau's popularity. And I hope that this is not a signal that the Mark Carney and the globalists are going to try to do something similar in Canada. So we'll see what happens, but I think this policy would be an absolute disaster.
Yeah, and on that bombshell, it's time to end the show. So
sounds good.
Yeah, that's, you said everything I wanted to say, so I have nothing else to add. And that concludes another successful week of the Zillennial Money Show. Even though it's a smaller crowd today, I will do the outro. But thanks everyone for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe to our Clips channel, which is called Zillennial Money Clips, which there will be an end screen for that at the end of this video. So thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.
See you guys next week. Don't be an NPC.